Hi everyone, this is Aruna. We are going to continue the same unit called Definition and Scope of Translation in this session also. But this session will be shedding light on the following topics: the origin of translation theories, the impact of servant translator legacy, issues in terminology, and also the advancement in translation studies. Let's move to the session. Susan Basnet traced the origin of translation theories from the period of Anglo-Saxon. We also know that Anglo-Saxon period is also called as the Old English period. It was a period where there was no theories existing. So it is also mentioned as an anti-theoretical tradition. So we cannot find any contribution in the period of Anglo-Saxon to the field of translation studies. But in the 18th century, we could find a few number of studies made by some scholars on the theory and practice of translation. The theories of the 18th century created a new tradition or legacy called servant translator. This servant translator legacy had a high influence throughout the 19th century. Let's understand the concept of servant translator. The term itself clearly explains that a translator is merely seen as a servant, because a translator, while translating a work from the source language to the target language, was not allowed to make his own contribution. He had to simply change the content from the SL to the TL. He was not supposed to make any additions or corrections, exclusions or inclusions into his TL text. In that case, the SL text and its author became the master, and the translator, who was simply transferring the things from the SL to the TL, became the servant. He plays the role of a servant who simply obeys his master's words. That's why the tradition of servant translator arose in the beginning of the 19th century. Alexander Titler contributed the first theoretical essay on translation in English, titled as Essay on the Principles of Translation, in 1791. But in the mid of the 19th century, translation was seen from a different perspective. It was seen as a serious and useful method to learn the text from the other languages. This perspective encouraged number of people to involve in the process of translation. So this century saw lot of amateur translators. These amateur translators had a problem. They simply tried to imitate the content from the SL to the TL, but they never attempted to explore the formal properties of a literary text. As all of us know, literary text must have contained a lot of formal properties like the choice of words, paragraph structure, sentence structure, imagery, metaphor, all those things. But these amateur translators did not worry about all those things. They simply tried to extract the content from the SL to the TL. Though there was a remarkable increase in the number of amateur translators and their contribution, though translation was seen from a different perspective, but the status of the translators remained the same. A translator was seen not as a creative artist but as an element in a master-servant relationship. Please don't confuse here. Master-servant relationship or servant-translator legacy are the same concept. When we say master-servant relationship, in that case, who will be the masters? The SL text and its author will be the masters, and the translator will be the servant. Dan Gabriel Russetti, one of the most famous 19th century writers and one of the founders of pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, observed this master-servant relationship and declared that the work of the translator involved self-denial and repression of his own creative impulses. That means a translator was not supposed to put himself while he was translating a work from the SL to the TL, and he should keep his creative impulses under control. He may be a good creative artist or he had a great imaginative power. For that reason, he should not make any additions or any changes in the process of translation. He had to merely transfer the content alone. He was not supposed to make any changes there. That is, as a servant, he had to obey the instructions that are laid by the master. That is the SL text and its author. But the case of Edward Fitzgerald was just an opposite situation, which was stressed by Dan Russetti. Edward Fitzgerald was a writer who translated the Persian poem called the Rubaiyat into English. The Persian poem was written by Omar Khayyam. But here, Edward Fitzgerald, though he was a translator, he did not act as a servant. He was given the full liberty to make the relevant changes in his translation. The next topic, the impact of servant translator or master servant legacy. This topic is going to highlight on the impact which was created by the servant translator or master servant legacy. Let's take the first method, in which the SL author was acting as a feudalist who was expecting the loyalty from the TL translator. How a feudalist expects his labors to be faithful to him. In the same manner, the SL author also expects his translator to be loyal to him. He did not allow the translator to make any changes of his own in the translated work. But the second method, which was announced by Edward Fitzgerald, was entirely different. In that case, the translator has no restrictions. He can enjoy all the liberties while translating a text from the SL to the TL. Now a question may arise in your mind. Why Edward Fitzgerald was given full liberty while he was translating that work? The reason is, Edward Fitzgerald translated a Persian work into English. Because of the colonization, all over the world there was a belief that English was a superior language. All their regional languages are inferior to English. So people, they also wanted to upgrade the text of their own regional language into the level of English. That's why they were longing for someone to translate that regional language text into that global language. That's why Fitzgerald was given full freedom while he was translating the work from Persian into English. At the same time, a translator was strictly bound with a master-servant legacy if he tries to translate a work from English into other languages. Because the English scholars were of the opinion that if they allow the translators to make some changes, that will spoil the reputation of the original work. That's why they did not allow the translators to make any changes as they wish. So these two different ideologies were existing in the same century, but the variation was based only upon the languages from which to which it was being converted. These two ideologies were the outcome of colonial imperialism and also created some kind of confusion that how to consider the task of translation. The confusions created by these two ideologies are: the first one, if we consider translation as a servile occupation, servile means of slavish. If we see the task which was done by a servant or a slave, we cannot dignify the work by the techniques which was utilized by a servant. Because in the first method, the translator was not allowed to use his own techniques. He was merely imitating the content from the SL to the TL. So in that case, the translated work cannot be appreciated. At the same time, if we take it as a pragmatic activity, of a practical activity, as in the case of Edward Fitzgerald, who tried to upgrade the Persian language text to the level of the English language text. If everybody started to do so, it would automatically destroy the hierarchical system. That means if all the languages are upgraded to the level of English, if everybody is equal, there won't be any hierarchy. That's why they were not able to take it as a practical activity also. So these are the two confusions which were existing in the beginning of the 20th century. That is, how to consider the task of translation, whether it is a servile or a slavish occupation, or whether it is a practical activity. In the second and third decades of the 20th century, the education system started to depend upon the use of translated text. The scholars were ready to teach the translated text, but they were not willing to teach the process behind the translation. So it resulted in a kind of confusion that the British and North American students, they learned so many Greek and Latin works, 19th century prose works, and the 20th century theatre text as if they were written in their native language. They were not aware of the fact that those things were written in some other language by some other authors. They were not aware of the fact. They simply learned only the product, not the process behind translation. Along with these two ideologies, one more problem was also existing, that was to find a suitable term to describe translation. Theodore Savery called it as an art. Eric Jacobson proposed the term craft for translation. Some other people wanted to call it as a science. Horst Frenz, he goes as far as to opt for the term art, but he holds back. He claims that translation is neither a creative art nor an imitative art, but stands somewhere between the two. The term craft also would not be suitable to describe translation because craft always implies a lower status than art, and also it does not suggest a professionalism. It always expresses a kind of amateurishness. So the term also wouldn't be suitable for describing translation. The term science also cannot be used to describe translation because science always refers to a mechanical approach, and it will also remove the idea from our mind that translation is a creative process, because when science is there will be no space for creative or imaginative activity. Science is a proven fact, so that term can also not be used to describe translation. A person called Anton Popovic compiled a work called Dictionary for the Analysis of Literary Translation, in which he dealt with the problem of terminological issues, and also he drafted some methods to learn translation works. We have come to the final topic. The scholars of the Prague Linguistic Circle took the privilege of introducing and developing new criteria for the founding of translation theories. Here is a list of the most famous scholars of the Prague Linguistic Circle and the works which have established certain criteria to find new translation theories. In the 1950s, machine translations were introduced. Machine translation means with the help of some softwares, they were able to translate a book from one language to the other. It helped translation studies to develop rapidly in the Eastern European countries. But in the English speaking countries, the discipline was emerging very slowly. In 1965, J.C. Catford brings into light a new problem called linguistic untranslatability. Linguistic untranslatability means we can, according to that concept, we can substitute the meaning of SL into TL, but we cannot substitute each and every word from SL to TL. That is called as linguistic untranslatability. So these concepts of equivalence and cultural untranslatability went on a long way since 1965. That means it underwent so many researchers, so many people, they came out with different theories, different ideas to deal with the problem of equivalence and cultural untranslatability. We have come to the end of the session. So in this topic we have covered the 4 topics like the origin of translation theories, the impact of master-servant legacy, issues in terminology, and advancement in translation studies. I hope this video will help you to understand better. So thank you for watching this video. Stay safe, stay home.